have an unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Osborne, and you're listening.
This is Hudson Hammond, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland, and you're listening to...
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr. J Radio Live.
We have an unidentified flying object.
Okay, everybody, we are back with the godfather of the ancient astronaut theory, and that is the one and only Erich Von Daniken. Mr. Von Daniken, welcome back.
Well, I'm happy to be with you, but I'm sitting in Switzerland, you see.
That is the power of our technology now. We are literally across the world speaking almost as if we're next to each other. And in a short amount of time, you're actually going to be here in the state of California presenting in Joshua Tree at Contact in the Desert. And that'll be even closer. Instead of being halfway around the world, you'll be literally in the same world. But while we just jumped on that topic, the fact that you're coming to California, since so many people are excited to see you, over 100 television shows of ancient aliens have aired, all because of theories coming from you. What are you going to show people this time that they didn't get to see last time they saw you?
You see, I have so far published 37 books. That means I have a lot of information. And in the meantime, I'm nearly 80 years old. And they all started, when I started my job, I was about a boy of 16 in a Catholic boarding school. So since the 16 years and the 80-year-old Erich Von Daniken, in the meantime, I learned a lot and I have information. Even I could talk for 3 days. It would never end.
That's right. That's why I enjoy having you back every time, because you teach me something new. And one thing I didn't mention earlier is you've been an inspiration for several, but you were a great inspiration for me. I remember when I was young and I first read Chariots of the Gods, I was blown away because we were speaking off air, me being Greek, knowing the Greek mythology, I just knew there's no way that they thought that what they were writing about mythology was a fantasy. I think there had to be some truth to it. So I was already thinking around the same lines as you. But speaking of Greece, we were talking about going off here. You're going to visit some of the famous sites, Delphi. What is it in Greece that stood out to you when you visited there?
When I was a boy at the high school, we had to learn Greece. I learned the old Greek language for 8 years. I lost everything. At the same time, we had to learn about Greece mythology. And even as a boy, I realized that behind Greece mythology, there is an old technology. It's not just fairy tales. Many of these things have a technological background. For example, there is the island of Crete. And around the island of Crete, there was a robot surrounding the island. The name was Talos. Now, Talos was surrounding all the time the island of Greece, and whenever a ship wanted to come close, near to the border, the robot shot it down by a lightning beam. So this is technology. Or, for example, in Delphi. Delphi is the place where Apollo descended first. Apollo is the son of Zeus. Now, Apollo just did not appear in Delphi as coincidence. He was observing the planet. He realized that in Delphi there were people, humans, working, and he descended at that place to teach them, to help them. He helped them in culinary. He helped them in building. He showed them how to construct on the hills and on the mountains, etc. And Apollo, every year, twice, he left Delphi in a fiery chariot. He went to a faraway land which was called the land of the Hyperboreans. In German it's Hyperboreer. I don't know what is the spelling in English. So Apollo definitely had a flying machine. He was coming out with this flying machine, sometimes even out of the deep sea. And then he flew over Delphi and he flew far away and he returned to the ancient Greece. Or another story, Greece. You see, you just mentioned places like Delphi, Epidaurus, whatever, all these great Greece places. They are all linked together in the same distances and in the same angles, which is crazy.
On top of that, a lot of these structures have alignments with astronomical features, such the pyramids of Giza aligned with Sirius. Did you find any alignments like that in Greece?
Of course. It's about 30 years ago when I was in Greece, and then I met a high military airport. He was a colonel or something like this. And he asked me if I would have time to listen to him. So we went to the military airport in Athens, and he showed me maps, aerial maps of Greece. And then he took a measuring device, and he explained to me that all the real old Greek places, I mean, older than the classic Greece, it all dates back to Stone Age. Nobody can date it directly how old the original is. He told me, and he showed me on the map, that all these old places are linked together with the same distances. It's absolutely incredible. Now you must imagine that, for example, Delphi is in the same distance to another place, to whatever. I don't know it in my head. So it's fantastic. So somebody must have given the old Greece order to construct their holy places at that place. The question is why.
Exactly, and you mentioned a very good point. Somebody gave them the orders how to construct, gave them instructions of exactly how to do it properly, as well as gave them wisdom. Every culture talks about being given wisdom from the star people, or the people from above, the people visiting, those in the chariots. What do you think there was an agenda, or do you think there was multiple races? We can only speculate on this, right? All we have is the evidence. What do you think the reason they were helping the human beings was?
You see, I am familiar with the old historians, and with old historians, I mean those men who have written their stories 2,000 and more years ago. For example, the Greek Herodotus, or Diodor of Sicily, or Strabon, or Plutarch, or Plato. They have all written stories, and they all write about the gods. And the gods were teachers. At that time, the gods helped mankind. The gods instructed mankind how to make buildings, how to plan, so about the engineering science. But also, they told them about astronomy, about the sun, the stars, about our calendar. The earth surrounds our sun in 365 days. Because there is a leap year. They have a leap hours. So anyhow, the gods were teachers. Then we have, for example, the Greek historian Herodotus. He was in Egypt around 450 BC. And he was also in Thebes. Thebes is on the Nile. It's today called Luxor. And there, Herodotus writes that the high priest showed him 231 statues, one statue next to the other one. And the high priest explained to every statue something, who was he, when was he living, etc. At the end, the high priest told to Herodot, these 231 statues represent 11,341 years. At that time, the gods from the firmament were among the humans. Since that time, they have not come back again. So, Herodotus make these statements about 2,500 years from now on. And he says, 11,340 years. That means we have to add the 2,500 years from now to the 11,000, which means roughly 14,000 years ago, the gods, the extraterrestrials, were here. And it's a Greek historian who gives these figures, Herodotus. By the way, if you want to control it, take the second book of history of Herodotus, chapter 241 and 242.
Absolutely, and this is why I think you're so fascinating, because you're so well versed in everything, in all of ancient culture, and that's why you can make it in any field, and that's what I adore about you so much. I want to ask you something different. Obviously, you have serious inspiration to so many people around the world. You're still in demand. We're doing this radio show. You're going to be speaking soon again. You travel the world. You do tours. But when you were first writing Chariots of the Gods, and you first submitted it, I believe it was into, instead of an entire book, was it chapters that you released in a Swiss paper?
No, first. You see, I was in a high school in Switzerland led by Jesuits. I was educated as a Catholic. In this high school, we had to make translations from part of the Bible. I was a deep believer in God. By the way, I still believe in God, but my belief has changed. So I read in the Bible that God in the Bible descends with smoke, fire, loud noise, trembling, etc. So I had doubts in my own education. I said, my God does not need a vehicle which makes noise and fire, etc. My God does not need a vehicle to move from point A to point B. My God is all over. My God is out of time, is timeless, etc., etc. So I had doubts in my own education, and I simply wanted to find out if other societies in communities in past have the same or similar stories. That was the starting point. But from my family, I came from the hotel business. So I first entered after high school in the hotel business. I was for a short time a waiter, I was a cook, I was sitting at the reception, I was making the contability. Of course, I was in a hotel school to learn, and when I wrote Chariots of the Gods, I was the managing director of a first-class hotel. So I wrote Chariots of the Gods just in my free time, in the backyard of the hotel. That was in 1966, long time ago. I sent my manuscript to 20 German publishers, but nobody wanted to publish it. Finally, I had the help of someone. He knew a publisher, and then it worked. And Chariots of the Gods in the German language came on the market in March 1968. It was an immediate bestseller.
Yeah, exactly. Almost 50 years ago, you've written this fascinating book, which is still being bought and sold today. I have a friend who recently purchased it, and I was blown away. I was like, you haven't read it? And they said, this show, Ancient Aliens, got me churning my mind. I never once thought about it. Then I see this person, Erich Von Daniken. I wanted to see his book, and I was blown away that even to this day, there are people that didn't know about this. But when you first wrote the book, and obviously 20 publishers didn't publish it, when it was finally out there, it became a bestseller, what was the reaction of the general public? Obviously, if it was a bestseller, they loved it, but what did the mainstream people...
You see, the general public loved it, because otherwise it would not have become a bestseller, even in Switzerland. Switzerland is very conservative, and it was a place number one in all the newspapers. But the academic world and the journalistic world, they all crashed me down. They all thought, this is ridiculous, this is nonsense. It is impossible that humans were visited by beings from outer space. First, it is impossible that extraterrestrials look similar to us. And second, it is impossible to reach the distances from star to stars, because these are light years. So I was really crashed down by all kinds of scientists, especially, of course, by the archaeologists, because I made some suggestions that some of the sculptors, some of the chiselings in archaeology, we should look with new eyes. We should see them as the gods from outer space. And archaeologists didn't like this. So in the beginning, I had really a hard time. I was crashed down. So it is my character to be better and better, to not repeat any mistakes. And of course, I made mistakes. When you are young, you are enthusiastic. You are not self-critical enough. You believe every rubbish. That happened to me too. So there are some misunderstandings in Chariots of the Gods. But my character says, Eric, do not repeat any mistake. Be better and better and better. So with every book I learned. And now, in the meantime, it's 37 titles on the market, and I am a little bit proud of it.
You should be, and I am very proud of you for what you've done and for shaping the world. Like I said, there's almost 100 shows based on your book, which started, Ancient Aliens, the show started as a one-off series, a 1 2-hour special, which turned into 8 seasons and going on. So many of your fellow researchers that you were the inspiration to, Georgios Tsoukalos, William Henry, Jason Martell. As a matter of fact, Jason Martell recently was on the show, and he was talking about, he gave an alternative theory, and I wanted to ask you what you think about this. He also mentioned the cycle that you're talking about. He broke it down to the same way you did 11,000 and change, and then factor in the fact that was BC, so it brought it to about 14,000 years. And he thinks that there's a cycle, that at some point the civilization that was gone is going to return. Do you think we're on some sort of cycle, or was it they were just here at that time, did what they had to do, moved on?
Well, there is a certain cycle because they promised in the past, our forefathers, we will return. We will return in the far future, and they will return. So there is a certain cycle. According to my research, we have been visited in the past at least 3 times. Last time might be maybe 3,000-4,000 BC, and the second last time about 14,000 BC. And according to my researchers, they should return now soon again in this cycle. You see, the gods, the so-called gods, were extraterrestrials. They promised our forefathers we will return in a far future. This promise of return entered into every culture in the past. For example, when Francisco Pizarro was the Spanish conqueror which came to South America, to Peru. When he arrived in Peru the first time, the natives believed that the Spanish man is a returned god. The same thing in Central America. Hernando Cortés was the Spanish when he came to the king of Moctezuma of the Aztecs. The Moctezuma king believed that the Spanish Hernando Cortés must be the long-awaited god. The same thing happened in the South Sea with James Cook. Anyhow, with all these people. So the idea of returning, that somebody comes back, is not a Christian invention. That existed long before Christianity. And what happened today? I am educated as a Christian. We Christians, we wait for the return of Jesus. But the Muslim society, they also wait for the return of their Mahdi. Or the Jewish society, since more than 5,000 years, they wait for the return of their Messiah. So not only the cultures who died out were expecting someone, also our today's living religions. Now, to be honest, not every religion can have right. Some of them must be wrong. And I suggest they are all wrong. It's not Messiah or Mahdi or Jesus or whatever which will return. It's simply the extraterrestrials. And it's better for us humans, to be prepared for such a possibility. Otherwise, we will be shocked completely.
And I'm also glad, for the same reason as I said I was glad earlier, that you mentioned all these cultures. Even the South Americans and North American, Native American tribes, they all talk about the sky people saying they're going to return. And as you mentioned, the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, they all talk about a Messiah, whether it be, like you said, Christianity waiting for Jesus or Judaism waiting for their prophet to return. All of them are waiting for something, and all of them feature a great flood, which shows to me that you're right. They all can't be right, but there's something common with all of them.
Absolutely, you get the point. Exactly, that's it.
What other commonalities did you find with all these religious books?
Well, in all the religious books in antiquity, the so-called gods have descended from the sky, and in most of the cases with smoke, fire, trembling, loud noise, etc. In some of the holy books, the extraterrestrials, or at least some of the extraterrestrials, they even had sex with humans. Now that seems from the beginning on very stupid, because one should think, well, extraterrestrials, it is impossible to have sex with humans because they have definitely a complete different evolution and they have not the same sexual apparatus. But there is another theory which is called panspermia. According to panspermia, the extraterrestrials who were here look similar to us, and we are the offsprings of it. In that case, that means they were similar looking and sex would be possible. So this is in different religion the case. By the way, even in the book of Enoch, where he even gives the names of the one who had sex with humans, or in the Bible. Just go to take your Bible, which you have in your office somewhere, and read Moses, first book Moses 1:6. And there you see, when the sons of the gods saw that the daughters of men were beauty, they took them to wife. Which sons of which gods? So this is common in many religions. Or that the extraterrestrials look similar, we find in the Bible, and in other holy communities we find that the gods created humans according their own image. So we are the offsprings of somebody else. That doesn't, by the way, does not contradict evolution. That's another complicated story, which I will explain it in Joshua 3. Now, you ask me, what are the commons in all the religion? They came down with smoke, fire, etc. They all promised to return in a faraway future. And in all the religions, they took some of the humans up into their spaceship. Now, in religious translation, it is said, well, the humans were brought into heaven. It's not heaven. Heaven in the sense of a holy place where you are close to God. It was not heaven. It was space. Because these humans were taught up there, and then they brought them back to Earth to teach humans. It's not the place after death, heaven. So all this is common in many of these religions.
I'm glad you brought up Moses, the exact quote, because it's right there in the Old Testament. People cannot dispute the fact that it says the sons of the gods saw that the women were beautiful and had sex with them. And depending on which version of the Bible you read, it varies words with one way or another, but it says the exact same thing. The sons of the gods
in some of the Bible they say the sons of the gods. In other Bibles, it's a question of translation. They say the fallen angels. So what fallen angels? Normally, angels should not have sex with humans, but according to the Bible, they had sex with humans.
That's right, and it's in the Bible, and that's why I think so many people cannot dispute the fact that it's in that ancient holy book. I'm glad you brought up the fallen angels. A lot of people think that these extraterrestrials that visited us thousands of years ago were what they call Nephilim. Do you know what the Nephilim are?
Yes, of course. I mean, I knew very well my late friend Zachariah Sitchin. And he made this translation, and he came up the first time with the name of Nephilim. Nephilim is the same. They were the visitors from outer space. It's just another word for them. Zachariah Sitchin, in his books, the 12th Planet, and other books, he comes up with the story of the Nephilims.
Yes, that's right. And that leads me to the next question, is you inspired so many people throughout your life. Now, who was your inspiration when you were researching and going through, your young life, entering into this world of showing the truth? My
inspiration was definitely the Bible. Absolutely the Bible. We had, I said before, to translate parts of the Bible from Latin to Greek and from Greek to German. And then you read, for example, Moses in the beginning. Moses describes, before the Lord descends on the holy mountain, he gives order to Moses that Moses should construct a gate around the mountain so that the people, the Israelites, would not come close by. Because if they would come close by, they would be destroyed. So Moses constructs a gate, and the Israelites are quite away from the mountain in a distance. And then the Lord descends. In the Bible it is described like smoke, fire, trembling, loud noise. The whole mountain was burning like a burn ash, etc. So when I was 16 and I translated this from one language to the other, I said, this is impossible. I love God. I love the concept of God, the spirit, the wonderful spirit of the universe, the creation of everything. But my God would never need a vehicle which makes smoke, fire, loud noise, trembling. My God would not need an order to construct a gate before so the Israelites would not come close by. So I simply had doubts in my own religion. And that was the starting point for a young Erich Von Daniken to go in all these things.
One thing that seems to be prevailing in all of the ancient texts is the notion of some Star Wars, meaning that there's different factions that were fighting each other. And one of them I'm talking about is the ancient Hindu text. The name is good. I don't want to mispronounce it, but I think you know what I'm talking about, where it refers to a sort of a war going on, but a blast so powerful that was stronger than the sun, and it killed a lot of people, which is very similar to what a nuclear weapon would do now.
Again, we have this war in heaven in many of the old holy books and in many of the mythologies. Everybody knows about the god Zeus, the Greek god Zeus, and then his son Apollo. But before Zeus arrived to our solar system, he had a fight in heaven against Kronos. Or in the book of Enoch. The book of Enoch comes from old Ethiopia. Before the extraterrestrials appear here in our solar system, they have a fight in heaven again. Or we simply take the Mahabharata, which you just mentioned. The Mahabharata is an old Indian text. It's a gigantic text, more than 1,200 pages, and that they are separated in different books. And in the fifth book, which is called the Mausala Purva, there you find a description that of a sudden 3 cities appeared on the firmament, and the humans looked up at these cities, and there were a clear difference between the cities who moved around our Earth or the stars. Different. Then out of these cities, smaller vehicle came. They were called Vimanas. Some of the humans were taken up there to these cities in the firmament. In my opinion, mother spaceships. And then the humans had to realize that these so-called gods, they had a war against each other. They were fighting. 2 of the cities in the firmament were destroyed. The humans on Earth saw the light balls on the sky, and they saw how it all descended, except one city in the sky which survived. Now, I have often been accused by critics to say, come on, Erich, this is all just fantasy. That's imagination. And of course, we humans had a great imagination. Without imagination, there would be no science today. But our critics always forgot one thing. The war in heaven even took place in our own religion, be it Jewish or Muslim or be it Christian. Look, according to Christians, when somebody dies, a human dies, the soul goes to heaven, goes to God, is close to God. There is peace up there. But in the same heaven, there was a war. One day, the archangel Lucifer came to the Almighty God and said, we do not serve you anymore. Then the Almighty God gave order to the archangel Michael to destroy Lucifer and his disciples. And Lucifer was thrown out of the heaven. So here we have a real contradiction. Heaven in religion means place of happiness. Be near to God. If you are happy, there is no war. There is no opposition. Both cannot exist at the same time. So it was not a war in heaven, it was a war in space. And that's what all religions say.
Again, another thing you mentioned, that this transcends every religion and everything. This is something that you could find in every religious book, and if it's not a religious book, you could still find references to these Star Wars, for lack of a better term, in every ancient culture. Now, I'm going to bring up one specific area in Turkey that has been making a lot of headways in the last couple of years ever since its discovery, and I know you know a bit about this place. Göbekli Tepe. That has been dated to be several thousand years older than what was mainstream scientists originally thought. What were your impressions when you first saw it?
We have been, we all learned that one of the oldest places in the world is Stonehenge in England. And they said the first beginning of building of Stonehenge was about 2800 BC. So according to traditional archaeologists, Stonehenge would be older than the Great Pyramid, because the Great Pyramid was constructed, according to archaeology, about 2500. So Stonehenge would be a little bit older. But altogether it means roughly 3000 BC. And now comes this Göbekli Tepe. And Göbekli Tepe is definitely dated between 8 and 11,000 BC. And it is definitely artificial. There was engineering knowledge. There was knowledge in handicraft. There were pictures in there. So what's wrong with our evolution? According to Göbekli Tepe, neither Stonehenge nor pyramids were the first buildings which mankind did. So it always goes deeper back. And finally we end to the place of Herodot, 14,000 BC. Now the question in Göbekli Tepe is, why for heaven's sake have our Stone Age people constructed such gigantic places? They are monoliths there on this place. There is nothing near it. The next river is about 6 kilometers away. Workmen who work on the Göbekli Tepe, they always need water. So why has it to be this place exactly? There comes mythology. We all know from the Bible Abraham, one of our forefathers. Now Abraham, the Abraham story does not only exist in the Bible, you have some apocryphic texts. And one of these apocryphic texts is called the Abraham Apocryphic. There you read a story that Abraham, one evening, he was sitting out in his garden. And the place where Abraham was living was just very close to today's Göbekli Tepe. Then two beings came down from the sky, and Abraham realized very quick they are not humans. He said, I never saw these beings on earth. They did breed, but not like we humans breed. The two beings, they asked him if he wished they would take him up to heaven and to teach him. Abraham says, yes, I'm happy to go with you. They bring him up to the sky. Abraham describes it, they brought me up like with many, many hot winds. Then he's up there and he sees something which he cannot explain. He says there were gigantic round things, I have no word for it. These round things always turned around themselves, around their own axis. And that Abraham says, I wish to fall downward to the planet Earth. So if somebody says this, he cannot be on Earth, he must be up. And then he says, the place where we stood always turned upside down and upside down. Of a sudden, I saw the earth up, and then I saw the stars down. Now, as soon as you are in a mother spaceship will always turn around its own axis, because by turning by itself, you arrive at centrifugal forces. And the centrifugal forces create inside the spaceship an artificial gravity. You are not swimming around, you have ground on your feet. But nobody could have known this thousands of years ago. Now, Abraham was there, and the extraterrestrials then brought him down. And maybe that was the reason for Göbekli Tepe. They want to make a gigantic holy place for the gods. Maybe they were expecting that the gods return to this place because Abraham was taken up to heaven from this place. So that could be the reason for Göbekli Tepe.
I never considered that, and that would make perfect sense to honor the location of where the gods took him and would bring him back and hopefully return. Now, speaking of Abraham, there are other figures in the Bible that were apparently also taken in craft. One of the stories, and correct me if I'm wrong, was when Moses was receiving the Ten Commandments. Wasn't he? Did he have a chance to be taken into the sky, or was he just had an encounter?
No, not Moses. Moses was up on the holy mountain and he received the Ten Commandments. Later he was up again with his brother Aaron on the holy mountain, and then he received the orders to construct the Ark of the Covenant. Later, but not in the Bible, that's again in apocryphic text. Later, Aaron, the brother of Moses, he was taken up to heaven by the angels. But Moses himself not. According to the Bible, nobody should know where Moses' tomb is. But in reality, in Israel, there is a tomb of Moses, but you never know if it's true or not. And another tomb of Moses is in the highland of India, in Kashmir. I was there. So we have two tombs of Moses, which in reality, according to the Bible, should not exist, because nobody should know where Moses was buried.
Interesting. That's a fact I didn't know about. Well, you brought up the Ark of the Covenant. Obviously, to think that we can get two animals of every kind and have them on a boat that will stay afloat for a great flood for 40 days and 40 nights, and then expect all these animals to breed and repopulate the world may not necessarily sound the most logical, especially since some of these animals may not necessarily be breeding. What's your take on the Ark of the Covenant?
Well, now we're talking about two different things. The Ark of the Covenant is an object which Moses made, and the other is the Ark, for the Great Flood.
Yes.
So you mean the Great Flood? Well, again, in the Bible, we read that God commanded Noah to construct an ark, a ship. He gives an exact measurement. And as we said before, 2 animals of each sort, male and female, went in there, and Noah and his family. But that story is not unique in the Bible. We, educated as Christians, we just know the biblical version. But, for example, in South America, there is an Indian tribe called the Kogi. The Kogi live in Colombia. Their city is called Buritaca dos Cientas. I was there, and the Kogi tradition says the same thing as we find in the Bible, just with other words. Well, some descendants from the sky came, and they warned the human that the gigantic flood would happen, and that most of the planet Earth, with all the animals and the humans, would be destroyed. And they construct an ark, a ship for the survivors. So we have this also in South America, the story. Among the Arabian world, you have it. For example, in Africa, in today's Republic of Mali, there is a tribe called the Dogon. The Dogon, again, know the story of the ship which survived, but it was extraterrestrials who constructed the ship in that case. So obviously, in many religions, we have these traditions. The other object is the Ark of the Covenant, which was a holy object. Nobody knows in reality what it was. Some religious teachers say, well, in the Ark of the Covenant, they were the 10 Commandments. Others say it's just empty because the Spirit of God was in there. Nobody knows what it really was. But the fact is, the Ark of the Covenant was dangerous. Many deadly accidents are described in connection with the Ark of the Covenant. Today, the rest of the Ark of the Covenant are in the Ethiopian city of Aksum, deep in the ground under the Cathedral of the Holy Virgin Mary. And just last year, the boss or the chief of the Orthodox Church of Ethiopia said, yes, I saw the Ark of the Covenant. It is not human. It is not made on this planet. So what it is, nobody knows, because we have not filmed it and photographed it. It's not possible to see it.
You're absolutely right. Some people say that it houses the 10 Commandments. Another theory I've heard was that it provided the manna that led people to stay alive in the desert.
Yeah, not the Ark of the Covenant directly, but the Ark of the Covenant was, so to say, the generator. You see, there was a machine which is called the manna machine. This is a construction of 2 British gentlemen, George Sassoon and Rodney Dale. They constructed really step by step the old traditions, and out came a machine which produced a special algae, which could be a basic nourishment. But this machine needed energy. And the energy came from the Ark of the Covenant. So the Ark of the Covenant was, so to say, a mini nuclear reactor, very dangerous, but at the same time, it produced energy for the manna machine.
Interesting, and that makes total sense that we have to think outside the box, that we didn't necessarily create these, that these were given to us by the so-called gods who may have been looking out for us or protecting their investment, per se, if we were doing work for them. Now, lost cities. A lot of people talk about Atlantis. Other people talk about this place called High Brazil, which was located near the UK, called the Celtic Atlantis. What are your thoughts about Atlantis and any lost city such as that?
Well, I have some 15 years ago published a book about Greece, and the name of the book is In the Name of Zeus. And there I have 2 chapters about Atlantis. I know the Atlantis story very, very well because I was able, as a student, to read the story in original language, in Greek language. It is handed down by Plato the philosopher. In 2 of his books, Critias and Timaeon, he describes Atlantis. And the description of Atlantis is so precise, really so well done, from the engineering point and from the measurement dates, that it cannot be an invention. I absolutely believe that Atlantis did exist, but no one knows for sure where it was. There are many, many speculations and calculations where it could be. In Greece, they say Atlantis was in the Mediterranean Sea. It was there and there. Others say no, it was in the Atlantic. And again, others say it was there where today Cuba is, where Bimini is, in the so-called triangle, the dangerous triangle, the Bermuda Triangle. So for sure, nobody knows because we have not found it. We have not filmed Atlantis under the sea. But I'm absolutely clear Atlantis did exist. And Atlantis, by the way, was created by one of the gods. You see, in the book of Enoch, there were many of these extraterrestrials, and they were all teachers. These extraterrestrials, they had sex with humans, and because of sex with humans, they were not allowed to continue their trip to outer space with the commanding spaceship. So they stood on Earth. And some of these extraterrestrials, they took women on Earth. For example, Poseidon. The god Poseidon was one of these mutineers from Enoch, and he found a wonderful human girl with the name of Cleito. And because he had sex with Cleito and Cleito made children, he constructed Atlantis. Atlantis was in the beginning the protecting island so that his enemy could not attack his family, his wonderful sons and girls and his wife. That was the beginning of Atlantis, created by a god, by Poseidon.
That actually I didn't know, but that would make sense because a lot of people, when they spoke about Atlantis, said that it was an island that housed great architecture, a higher advanced civilization that was wealthier and more intelligent. And so it just makes perfect sense to know that maybe it was constructed by something else and left entirely as something else. Now, I'm going to ask you about a few specific technologies. One thing that came forward to me that blew my mind was when people in Egypt, archaeologists, discovered the Baghdad battery, the fact that they were able to create a reaction, an electrical reaction with citric acid, whether it be lemons or oranges, and vinegar. And I thought that was fascinating. They were able to create, 4 volts of energy?
Yeah, and that's not only one example. In the meantime, 4 of these batteries were found, 2 in Egypt and 2 in Iraq. And we have made a copy of this battery for us in Interlaken in Switzerland. We still have this famous park, which was called the Mystery Park. It's still there. And there we have a copy of that battery, exactly copied from the original. And every tourist can watch it soon as we add a little acid, be it vinegar acid or lemon acid, then you receive 4 volts. So electricity existed in the past. Not for the common people, not for everyone, but at least for the priest. The priests had the power and they could enlight some bubbles and impress the crowd.
That's right. Then the priest was some of the most powerful people. In Egypt, it was the pharaoh and the high priest. They were the ones that had the knowledge. They were the ones that made the decisions for everyone.
And the technology always came from the gods. It was the gods who were the teachers who told them, you can do it this and this way, you can impress your crowd, your people, by doing this, so they will respect you, they will be afraid of you. The technology always came from the extraterrestrials. Another
piece of technology, now this is going back to Greece because obviously, we've been talking about Greece because of the fact that you're going to go there and I'm Greek. The Antikythera machine, going back thousands of years, and some people say is the earliest form of computer, which is so far advanced of the time, what ancient Greeks were doing then to create such a machine. What are your thoughts on that machine?
You see, the machine was found on a little island, but in the sea, under the sea, under the water. The island is called Antikythera. That's why the mechanism is called the machine of Antikythera. For some 40 years or more, the public could never see the machines of Antikythera. It was not seen for the public. By the way, the machine was found in the year 1901, so a long time ago. In the meantime, the situation has changed. Some professors in the United States, Professor Dr. Solar Price, they have looked carefully to this machine. It has different cogwheels in different sizes, etc. And it turns out the machine was some sort of planetarium. It showed the surrounding of the planets in our solar system. But the problem is, in our solar system we have planets like Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Pluto is far away. Some thousands of years ago, nobody knew about Pluto. But it's part of the mechanism of the machine of Antikythera. So where does the knowledge come from? The Antikythera machine is not an extraterrestrial object, but the technology behind it, the knowledge behind it, is extraterrestrials. It's far behind the knowledge of our Stone Age people. Some humans made it with their hands, but under the guidance of some gods.
Exactly. It was used by humans, Earth objects, Earth materials, but the plans obviously were given by the people who gave them the wisdom.
Exactly.
Which were the extraterrestrials. Another thing that always, an object from antiquity that always stands out in my mind, going back to Egypt now, is that little model, gold model. It's very small, that looks like a shuttle, a modern day shuttle. And in the show Ancient Aliens, one of the episodes that all you did was you created a model of it, attached a propeller, and the airplane flew. What do you think the Egyptians were thinking, or what were they seeing when they created something that looks so familiar?
We have different of these models. One of them you just mentioned, it was found in Egypt, and it was on an exhibition for decades in the Egyptian Museum. It's still there today in the Egyptian Museum. Another of these aircraft models was found in Colombia. In Colombia is a place called Tierra Dentro, which means translated inside the earth. And in Tierra Dentro there were found different tombs of high priests or of very wealthy persons, meaning 2,000 years in the past, 2,000 years before Christ. And in their tombs, some of these aircraft models were found. They were golden, so it must have been something very important, not just a silly insect or a fly. They were golden, and they were in the tombs of these rich Indian leaders. Now today, these models are in the so-called Gold Museum in Bogota. The tourists can look at them, can photograph them. We have our organization in Germany and in the world, which is called the Ancient Astronaut Society. And our logo of the society is one of these models from the past. Now in Switzerland, we asked some engineers, aircraft engineers, could this thing fly or not? So they constructed a simple propeller on it and a very simple model. And we let it fly over the Swiss Alps here, where I live. And it flew perfectly. Absolutely no problem. So I suggest some of our forefathers in Egypt and in South America, they saw something like the gods flying in some machine. They could not understand the technology, but they made copies of it. They adored it. And finally they took it into their tomb in remembrance of the gods.
And then, of course, thousands of years later, we humans are flying machines that look identical to what they created as models. And like you said, obviously, they revered them very much to create them out of gold.
Definitely.
A couple more questions, and then I know you have to go. You've been to so many countries. You tour across the world for the last 50 years, and you're continuing to do so. Every single continent has ancient culture and has a link to the past of being visited. Did you find that any particular country may have more activity than others?
Well, normally in Europe, for example, we found practically nothing, because 10 and 12,000 years in the past, Europe, Switzerland, for example, where I live, or Germany, or Belgium, that was all ice age. It was all forest. It was jungle here. All the great culture happened left and right to the equator, where the climate was hotter. So like Egypt, or Colombia, or Peru, or in Mexico, there we find these objects and these mythologies. The same thing in old India. but not in the frozen places. I mean, frozen 10, 12,000 years ago.
Interesting. And I would think, too, the fact that if something was happening in Europe 10, 12,000 years ago or further, and then, of course, you have the civilizations that came on after that, clearly they built over that. There was a famous television show, I'm sure you've seen this, where they literally, look at the cities underground, because what happened is as each new civilization came, they just built above the older civilization and built above that and built above that. And so the further you go, the older you find. But here's the ironic part. Sometimes you go down thousands of years and you see technology get worse and worse and worse, but then you hit a level where it's actually better.
That's That's contradicting evolution. I mean, not evolution in the human evolution, I mean evolution in technology. Evolution in technology means you invent something very primitive, and then you learn, and then you invent something with a higher technology, and so on. Evolution in technology. For example, in Old Egypt, there is a place called Abydos. In Abydos on the Nile, there is a temple. This temple was constructed by Sethos. Sethos the first, that means about 1300 BC. But then you see there is a hole in the ground. And in this hole, you see gigantic megalithic structures. They are definitely much older than Sethos the first, means older than 1300 BC. But the technology is much higher than the technology of Sethos. It is impossible. You see, they moved from Aswan. Aswan is about 400 kilometers away from Abydos. They moved blocks with the heavy weight of 100 tons. They polished it perfectly. They cut it. They put it together. They needed something like cranes to do this job. So the technology of Abydos, the oldest one, is definitely more perfect than the technology in Abydos from Sethos. We have no explanation for this miracle.
And that's what's so fascinating about looking through our history. We can't explain so many things, and that's why we have to look outside the box and think and recognize that we were helped. I mean, it's the only logical explanation. Obviously, things didn't magically appear without them being created. You don't have technology that just is not there one day and next day is there. Somebody had to create it. And, of course, somebody had to help them create it. So, of course, this is the next logical step. Just a couple more questions, and I know you have to go. You have so many achievements. And as I said in the beginning of the interview, you've inspired so many people, including myself. You have a theme park named after you. You have 37 books. You've been publishing for 50 years. You're 79 years young, and you're still going
No, not
strong.
79 years. I'm 80 years old.
You're 80 years young, and you're young, 80 years young, and you're still going strong. And everybody loves and appreciates about that. I know it's going to be hard for you to pick this out, but what would you say is your greatest achievement you've acquired in life? Because you've done so much.
Well, I am proud to have an open mind, and so many people write me, and so many scientists which I meet personally, they tell me that I changed their opinion. I changed their view. They look now in another possible director, including, you see, the Nobel Prize winner, Francis Crick. He said on a TV appearance shortly, he was influenced by Erich Von Daniken. 2 weeks ago, we had here in Germany a conference in my honor of my 80th birthday. There were 3,000 people, and among them was the American astronaut Ed Mitchell, and he congratulated. He said, I changed his mind. There was the British scientist, Mr. Chandra Vikram Singh. He's brilliant astrophysicist. Everybody knows him. And he said, Eric, you changed my mind. So I'm most proud of these things to have opened the mind of so many persons.
I would have to agree. People that 50 years ago, 40 years ago, were against you with the mainstream science because they weren't having an open mind, are now finally paying attention, and that's why I think it's so great. Mr. Von Daniken, it has honestly been a true pleasure. 37 books, 80 years young, still touring. Before you go, just where can people find your books? And I know people are going to see Contact in the Desert, Joshua Tree, but what else are you going to be speaking at, or any other tours you can tell?
Well, in the United States, it's Joshua Tree. It's at the end of this month. At the end of May. And there I have at least 3 or 4 appearances. And then later, only in September or October, I'm in Virginia Beach at the Edgar Cayce Foundation. But that's much later. First we have Joshua Tree. By the way, I'm talking in Australia in July and in August, talking in Europe and in Peru and all over. Just yesterday evening.
Bless you.
I'm sorry, I had some.
That's okay. Bless you.
Just yesterday evening, I was at the University of Fribourg. Fribourg is a university city in Switzerland. Yes, big universities. It's a city of students. And I had a talk at the university, and after me, a honorable professor comes and had a speech against my point of view. Of course, everything very friendly, very academic, etc. I was talking in my speak about flying chariots. I know from ancient Indian that these flying chariots did exist. They were flying over the air, they were flying to the moon, etc. Now the professor came and explained, well, this idea with the chariot, humans always had chariots. They wish to have chariots. Today we have modern chariots like a Mercedes car or a Ferrari car, and the rich people are proud to have several of these cars. In antiquity it was the same thing. The rich people, they had brilliant chariots, and they made these chariots with gold and sometimes with diamond, and then they were running around, and the air were flushing through their hair, so they had the feeling of flying. That's why the word flying chariot in ancient Indian comes from. I really said to myself, this dear professor has no idea of what really is described in the ancient text, because in the Vedas, they absolutely make differences between chariots who have wheels and chariots who have no wheels, between chariots which move on the earth and other chariots which move into the sky, even into the moon. So the academic world, although I respect them, and as I said, it was a wonderful discussion, does not know the old texts. They should learn again and open their mind again.
They are definitely keeping a closed mind, and that is why I think humanity as a whole is moving towards the proper direction, especially with all these new evidence coming forward, new planets being found, and of course NASA saying they will find life, and the recent statement earlier this year that life exists without a doubt. But again, Erich Von Daniken, everybody, it has been an absolute pleasure. Stay tuned for our next show.
Unidentified flying object.
I'm Jack Osborne, and you're listening.
This is Mr. Hammer, and you're listening to...
I'm Richard C. Hoagland. You're listening to
I'm Art Bell, and you're listening to Dr.